Throughout this course, each piece of text that we have read has added a new layer of complexity to the question, what is Native identity? This question has intrigued me because of its complexity, its social construction, and omnipresence in the status quo. Of course, this question could have many answers and many different ways to go about finding them. As someone who is not Native, I have no authority to and do not wish to continue the trend of non-Native people defining Native identity. Instead, I wish to analyze work by Native authors and ask questions about the performance of identity and roles that biology, culture, and political identity play in its creation. In order to prepare to answer these questions, I reviewed the books we read this semester through this lens and found a new text to add to my understanding. Over the past week, I focused largely on the book Native American DNA by Kimberly Tallbear. This text analyzes the rise of DNA testing and how it has been applied in conversations about who is Native in problematic ways. In this analysis, Tallbear provided me with important information about Native identity formation throughout history. Historically, Indian blood could be diluted over generations and absorbed into white populations, reflected through the U.S. assimilation policies of the 19th century, largely because of the need to absorb Native property. This contributed to the consolidation of black-white binaries as Black people could not undergo this cultural or racial evolution. This shaped rules of hypodescent and hyperdescent, and foregrounded the use of blood quantum in determining who counts as Native. Today's use of DNA testing draws on this history and histories of racial science. DNA tests are unable to provide useful information about specific tribal affiliations, and their use undermines claims to land, resources, and sovereignty. However, they are marketed as solutions to the complex issue of identity. This book will help inform the histories of how blood or genetics have been used in identity debate. Additionally, it will inform my analysis of statements made by political figures like Elizabeth Warren and Donald Trump to change the definition of Native or align themselves more closely with it. In addition to reading Tallbear, I looked back to readings about Cojuia and Iron Eyes Cody to contrast the way that Native identity is performed. In Mourning Dove's story, Cojuia's performance as a lady is separate from her performance as Indian, and her identity as mixed allots her certain rights or pushes violence upon her depending on how she presents herself. Iron Eyes Cody, by comparison, became the quintessential symbol for Indianness because he performed the identity on and off the screen in ways that drew on white expectations of nativeness. For Iron Eyes Cody, lack of Native blood or DNA did not prevent his acceptance as Native into white imaginaries. These stories complicate the importance of biology, culture, and politics in interesting ways. At this point, I believe I have reviewed enough sources to write a well-informed paper, but in order to complete it, I need to start actually writing. Obviously, I need to write in order to fill up the 10 pages, but what I mean is that I need to write in order to test out ideas and narrow down my focus. Because of the complexity of the topic, I feel slightly overwhelmed with how to pick and choose information to work with. I do not want to have 3 separate theses in one paper. I believe writing a draft, before even trying to formalize an outline, will help me to think about what direction I want my paper to go.